Okay, I'm just going to do a bit of a chat. I'll go through this quickly and then we'll restart the discussion. So I'll try and keep it moving. I'm going to talk about 3 ages of community energy. The pre-FIT, the golden years, and what I think is a bit of a hazy future, but what I want to really talk about is how that future, what we need to do to make that future a bit clearer and a bit more profitable. The pre-FIT years, before about 2010, 2011, it was capital grants. You could get a grant to pay for your scheme if you applied for it. We did a bit of work back in the early days. I've been involved in community energy since about 2009, 2010, so I do remember these eras when you could get the grants. There's the hydro scheme in the Cwmclydach Country Park, which was 100% paid for by grants. And it was you make an application, you get the grant, you build the scheme, you then get the income. It's a fantastic model. Talabon and Usk Hydro, 100% paid for by grants, and then 30,000 a year income. No shares to issue. Maybe that's the goal. Maybe that was the golden year. I'm not calling it the golden years because there was a lot of enthusiasm. We had capital grants. There wasn't much capacity. There wasn't much expertise in small scale. This was the early days. There weren't community groups who knew they were doing. There wasn't much support in terms of things. There weren't the skills. A lot of enthusiasm, a lot of skills. But it all ended with the Feedin Tariff. The Feedin Tariff, it was good and bad. In some ways, I think, this is for another discussion, I think it was badly mishandled. I think the figures were much too generous early on and have led to a lot of problems. So the Feedin Tariff was supposed to produce a steady knowledge about an income to justify investment in small-scale distributed renewables over the long term. But by starting off with 42 pence per kilowatt hour for PV, 22 pence per kilowatt hour for hydro, I can't remember what the first wind tariffs were. But the money, it created the very thing the government didn't want to create. It created a boom, and then a panic because of the money was being spent far too much. And as you know, the money isn't coming from government, it's coming from bill payers. It's going on, which created a very powerful argument which the energy companies used to change policy. The reason your energy bills are going up is not because we're greedy or lazy or not running very efficient companies, but because these green David Cameron's green crowd is putting an extra cost. Even now, the costs, about 15% of domestic energy bills, electricity bills, are green crap. Feed-in tariff, renewable obligations, all the rest of it. But it created a boom and a bust. We also had, on the plus side, I've got snakes and ladders motifs, the things that were helping, the things that were hindering. The feed-in tariff was the big one. We had a lot of support from government. We still have Welsh support. There's an Afro programme and the CNEO programme. Community Energy Wales was set up, giving community groups the support and the expertise, paying for those. The feed-in tariff gives you income when it's set up, but you need to do the feasibility studies, you need to do the assessments, you need to plan, it costs money to get planning permission. And communities don't have that asset, they don't have that cash sitting around, so they need that money. And Robert Owen Community Banking Fund, there are a whole bunch of places where you can get that early investment money. But then the problems we had, as the volumes went up, some of the planning authorities and, say, the licensing for hydro, the abstraction licenses, they began to panic. It was all right when there were just a couple a year. And suddenly there were applications for wind turbines coming up everywhere. The planning authorities, local authorities, planning for wind, abstraction licenses for hydro, they literally panicked. They just thought, oh my God, what happens? There are thousands of these things. And I was doing hydro schemes at the time. And the Natural Resources Wales have issued the abstraction licenses. I mean, they were actively, they were panicking. We've got to stop these schemes. Which then, at the time at which the returns were really, really good, made it quite difficult to get past some of these things. We then started hitting the problems, not everywhere, but particularly in mid-Wales and rural areas of Carmarthenshire, grid capacity. There isn't enough why the grid was designed to take central electricity from big coal power station and put it out thinner and thinner and thinner wires to the small towns and villages and farms. If you start putting wind turbines and generators out there, then there isn't a capacity there. And Western Power would say, yes, you might have planning permission, you might have the finance for the scheme, you might have public backing support, but there isn't a grid connection. And my off-site example, we were building a hydro scheme in mid-Wales, 15 kilowatts, which is tiny. It's less capacity than the roof, maximum output than the roof here. And we had a grid connection cost of a quote of £5.6 million from Western Power for that. A nice little letter with a form at the bottom. Please pay a deposit and we'll get working. We never did fill it in, actually. We didn't send it back. And it's kind of ludicrous. And then because of the panics, talk about the Daily Mail, the Daily Express, and the lobbying groups and the energy companies, they forced the digression of Feedin Tariff. So the one thing that the Feedin Tariff was supposed to provide, which was a constant, predictable playing field of return, so you could make long-term decisions about investment, they then started cutting it and cutting it and cutting it. And just to be clear, Feedin Tariff is gone completely from March next year. March 19, the Feedin Tariff is closed. It's gone. It's not a question of it being a small amount, it's gone. And if you don't, you can pre-register now, but there's quite a queue, so you still don't, even if you register now, you don't know which quarter of digression you're going to get. So it is kind of absurd. The one thing and it's a lot of money they've spent. I mean, we're talking 10 billion a year on Feedin Tariff has been spent, has come off bills, and it hasn't provided that. You don't want to hear about my political rant, do you? So it's been a snakes and ladders ride. We've gone up ladders and we're coming down the snakes, and it's been But on the community energy front, I mean, I've got these figures from Rob. I'm looking at your sheet. We've got, I estimated there are about 80 projects, community projects in Wales, up and running.
Not up and running. There's about
some of them
35 that are up and running.
And the rest are in the
sort.
Yeah, which would be about 11 megawatts, and a total of about £6 million has been raised locally through share offers to pay for some of those. So it's we're not in a bad place. We haven't been in a bad place. I think we could have harvested. We could have done more during those golden years, and Swansea and Bridgend are some of the best councils for responses to renewable energy. Some of the other councils where I live, where they live. But it's been very difficult. There was a great opportunity. We could have mobilised Welsh Government and we could have mobilised local authorities to do more 5 years ago. We'd have had some really good returns. We'd have had some really fantastic projects making really good returns, making a really big impact. It's just taken a long time for people to realise it. And it's been quite frustrating having some councils, not you guys, and some councils getting in touch now saying, oh, we think we might do something on renewable energy now. And then I explain what's happened to the Feedin Tariff, and it kind of, oh, you'd come 5 years ago. But it takes a long time. It's a difficult process, and as I think you were saying, there are many to get a commitment from the council. There are so many decision makers, so many, it's estates and energy and finance and all the other parts that have got to come together, and it's difficult to mobilise. That's one of the reasons it's been slow. But there's no point talking about that because that era is over, gone. So we've got to think about the future. A few good things, ladders, not snakes, for the future for distributed energy. The Welsh Government is consulting on, but has committed to, I think that's the right phrase. It's slightly odd, they've committed to the targets and now they're consulting on the targets. It's usually the other way around, but anyway, they've committed to these targets. They want a 70% renewable energy by 2030. Electricity, 27% electricity by 2030. And they want 1 gigawatt of that of energy capacity to be locally owned. Locally owned. Locally owned means individuals, domestic, but I'll come on to that. And that is quite wrong. There is an opportunity here, so the government's committed to that. The question is, how are we going to do it? Because the financial incentive for Feedin Tariff is disappearing. I'm not quite sure what's next.
Can I ask what it is at the moment?
What's that? Oh, yes, well, okay. This is from a Welsh Government Regen report which was published last year.
Yeah.
Last year. This is the 30%. This is the 70% target. This is renewables. For 2016 it was 45%. I guess it's probably up there, a bit there. So there is a problem. This is where that renewable generation. This is where it just gives you a snapshot where it is. I'll come on to ownership and community in a moment. This is total. So this is offshore wind, onshore wind, biomass, solar PV, hydros will be in here. And we're also talking about heat. We tend to talk a lot about electricity. We also need to consider the heat, biomass, CHP. I guess that would be AD is probably in here. So biomass and waste will be the AD for the electricity generation. There's a heat element of that. So it's just giving you that's the total energy output for Wales, regardless of ownership. I think what's on the next one. This one is a bit more sobering, in a way, for community energy, locally owned. This is the locally owned bit, and locally owned. That 1 gigawatt target for locally owned, farms and estates, local authorities, other public sector, local business, housing association, domestic electricity. I've spoken on the electricity one. Local business and domestic. Domestic means basically it's PV on domestic roofs. That's not going. There's no more of that coming. It's not. Well, very little, I don't think. The boom in that is getting, and that will be a lot of that will be the same. The red bit there, the community ownership of electricity generation, the local authority share. Community generation. Well, we can talk a bit. I'm just trying to put it. I'm thinking a bit depressing. They could say, "Well, this is a big opportunity for growth." Here, but you put it into context, and I suppose, in a way, it's a criticism of Community Energy Wales and us is that we didn't get a bigger in the golden years. We didn't get a bigger chunk of this. Than the rest of it. That community energy. Onshore wind, I think a very high proportion of that is Awal Tawi, solar PV, hydro, biomass, and on the heat, some of the biomass stuff. So the target, the Welsh Government target is a gigawatt, 1,000. This is 2016 figures with around, it'll be the two combined, are about 600 megawatts of capacity. So we've got another 400 megawatts of capacity to do by 2030, which will be locally owned. What's next? So coming back to a few future snakes this time. The grid capacity one is still there in some areas, not in all areas, but in some areas it's definitely a big issue. And it really comes down to the economics of distributed generation. So, which is how do you replace the feed-in? How do you replace the feed-in tariff? And there's a big policy crisis coming here. So more and more energy is being built. Renewable energy is coming from offshore wind farms, and those are the cheap ones. And the cheap offshore wind is in shallow water, which means the southern North Sea. So the offshore wind farms which have got cancelled are the ones that are expensive and deep on the western coasts in the Bristol Channel of North Wales. It's going, and that energy is getting very cheap. The good news is that energy is getting very cheap. Some of the contracts for energy, they're signing contracts for energy that's as cheap as £56 per megawatt hour, 5.6 pence per unit.
I think some saying 44.
It's very, very low. It's difficult, it's impossible. Smaller distributed energy, the kind of thing that we're talking about here, is per kilowatt hour produced is more expensive. It doesn't have the economies of scale. You're not producing 300 megawatts of capacity at Pennycoy, you're producing 20 kilowatts on a school roof. The admin cost, the install cost, the planning cost per unit, it doesn't add up. And if we don't have if we don't pay extra for distributed generation. But there is a problem coming, which the government is aware of, which is the electricity will all be generated in the southern North Sea, and our demand for electricity will go up as we start moving to electric vehicles, and we'll have to pay billions and billions to put in additional carrying capacity to get electricity. So there's a real need. We need to find a mechanism. The Feedin Tariff is one of the mechanisms for giving extra cash to local distributed generation, and that's called. Anything else? Right. So how are we going to do it in the future? One of the big opportunities, perhaps, and this is what is local supply, smart grids, batteries, a project that I'm involved with, Community Energy was involved with, which is called Energy Local. And as you probably said, if you just had the PV on the roof, when the early days we get the big feed-in tariff, put the PV on the roof, just export it to get 5p a unit for selling it and get your feed-in tariff at 14, 20, 10p, whatever it is, fantastic, job done, pay the investors, nice job. These days, or in the future, when that feed-in tariff is zero, you need that energy to be used locally. You need it to be behind the meter. You need it to be so that it's substituting for the import of a unit at 13p in the case of a school, or 15p in the case of a house. Then each kilowatt hour is not worth the 5p you sell it for, but the 15p that you're avoiding having to buy. And to be honest, for me, that is the future of distributed generation. We have to do that. There isn't going to be a substitute. There's not going to be a replacement for FIT. There isn't going to be a mechanism for that. So one of the things, putting renewable energy behind the meter of a demand customer that matches that demand customer score is something which still works. I think financially still works. One of the projects that so Robert, Community Energy Wales and I are involved with Energy Local, which is doing that behind a virtual meter. And this is where the fuel poverty issue comes of interest, because it's exactly what you're doing, but what you do is you probably have a bigger generator, and you can have houses that are around, close to the generator, not literally behind the meter, but behind a virtual meter. So you put half-hour meters in all houses and on the generator, and anything that's used within that collective within the half-hour counts as being netted off. And you agree, just as your price, you agree a price for the electricity which is used in that same half-hour. And that has two benefits. And so in Bethesda's, the trial run been running in Bethesda for a year now, which is 100 kilowatt hydro and 100 houses, and they agreed a match tariff. Well, that match tariff has just gone up to 8.5p, so it's similar to your one. And that's giving the generator additional income. So for the units of electricity that generate which are being used, they're getting 8.5p, not 5p. No feed-in tariff, but they're getting 8.5p, not 5p. And the houses, in that, if they're using energy at that time, are paying 8.5p instead of 15p. So they're both saving. So you're reducing it. Over the first trial period in Bethesda, they've saved about, the households are saving 25% of their electricity bills. And generators have generated about 20% extra income. And that's one mechanism for doing that. And we're trying to extend that area. And that potentially, it's behind the meter, but it's behind a virtual meter. So it's a mechanism for doing that. It has to be connected locally. You can't match the electricity from a wind turbine in Scotland with a community here. It needs to be at the same substations. And there is an advantage for that, because you're providing a financial mechanism, incentive for demand customers to match the generation time, the energy time of generation. And that's good news for the grid, and it's good news for the distribution, because the more you can match those supply and demand, you've got a financial incentive not to have all the demand when there's no generation, and you need lots of wires to get the energy in. And the opposite of that is lots of generation when there's no demand, and you need lots of big fat wires to get the electricity out of the area. So the more you can match demand, that's what smart grids are about, that's what batteries are about. It's about finding ways of matching demand and generation to take capacity pressure off the local distribution network.
Do you still need a grid connection?
You still need a grid. It's not off grid. That's right, because it's not an island or a private wire or a small network, because there are times when your generator isn't generating and you're still supplying, and it's not a supplier. We work with an external supplier. So we work with a third-party supplier who buys the electricity from the generator, buys the surplus electricity from the generator, and supplies the deficit electricity to the customers. But you net off first. So in this next half hour, let's say it's PV, this next half hour, the PV is going to produce 100 units, the houses are going to use 120. The generator isn't exporting anything in that half hour. It's all going to the houses, and then 20 extra units are coming in. And at the end of the month, or the end of the quarter, that half hour will get billed 100 units to the generator at 8.5p, 20 units to the supplier at the import rate. So it's a way of doing that. So that's one of the ways. Batteries play a role in that, because batteries are another mechanism for taking generation from when you don't want to use it, storing it, and using it when there's demand. And this is one of the ways of getting a financial model incentive to that. I mean, there are other helps that we got. I mean, there's small, community-owned hydro. There's 100% rates relief for community-owned hydro schemes, which has just been introduced. It isn't going to compensate for the fact that the hydro feeding tariff has fallen from 22p to nothing next year. PV costs have crashed down. I mean, they've really, really fallen. Hydro and to some extent wind turbine costs haven't crashed down because they're not mass produced in factories in China. They're expensive things to get. There's lots of labour involved in setting them up. Natural Resources Wales is actually consulting, or will consult, it's investigating, making sub 15 kilowatt hydro is permitted development, which is an extraordinary reversal from 5 years ago when they were just, oh, we're going to stop them. And that would be amazing, but again, that helps the process, but the underlying economics, unless you can get that generation behind somebody's meter, it's not going to happen. And lastly, what do I've got to think? I suppose this is my plea, and I think it's what Welsh Government's very keen for us to do, what the targets. I think through the golden years, it was quite possible. Community groups could do it on their own, some local authorities could do it on their own, lots and lots of householders and businesses got off their backside, spent the money, made a really healthy return. I mean, there's double-digit 20. Some of the hydro schemes that we built 5 years ago for farmers are making them 20% a year. I mean, they're getting 20-25% returns. There are projects with paybacks of 4 years, which went ahead. That isn't going to happen anymore. I think now scale is important. You getting some scale, that scale collectively across the area, or doing the bigger projects. And I suppose in a way, my plea is that we really start to cooperate. Governments, local authorities, social landlords. That loan finance. Can you have access to providential borrowing? Can you get low interest finance? Costs in there for that the high risk bit, the bit that you got from Robert Owen. There are land assets. You've also got obligations under the Wellbeing Act. Don't forget that. The Wellbeing of Future Generations. There are obligations there for community benefit, for long-term thinking, for planning, and that's a powerful weapon. Social landlords. Communities can bring in a lot of benefits into this equation. A trusted partner with individuals. If you're going to shift energy demand patterns, I would trust the community to mediate that change in demand more than I would an energy company, British Gas or the local authority. I think that's a really important role there. They can do local fundraising. It's just some things. Public engagement, getting buy-in to community renewable assets, particularly wind, which might not otherwise be acceptable. And don't forget the developers. They've got capital, they've got expertise. There are, we can work with those, especially for the larger projects that we've got to do. And I think the future really is going to be. I think we should really need to start working together. acknowledge the benefits and the assets that we've got together. There's now a lot of experience in this sector. There, on the hydro side, Green Valley's on the hydro side, Alabama Towie on the wind side, Gower Power on the PV. There's a lot of developer experience, which is richer than any, say, local authority or housing association has. So, let's really kind of putting out a plea here that we should really work together. Find the best sites, find the biggest sites. But we're going to have to, even to make these sites work, we're going to have to get this electricity used behind the meter by one mechanism or other. Private wires, using it indirectly in relation to a customer that's being done, using the energy local model, using other things to do that. And this is a slide which is a few years old. I mean, it's from Calvin Jones at Cardiff Business School. But I saw this again the other day, and I thought, yeah, that's why. There's two graphs here. It's per regions of the United Kingdom, and it's economic GVA. It's a measure of economic output per household. And Greater London has the highest, and Wales has the lowest. And the red dots, total energy consumption, that is everything. That's heating, that's domestic heating, that's transport, it's electricity, it's everything by region, total of it. Greater London, smallest, public transport, and the other things. Wales, the highest. So Wales, as a country, has the lowest income per household and the highest energy costs per household of any region in the UK. It's more important for Wales than for anywhere else in the United Kingdom to invest in with local money, money locally, and energy schemes which can reduce the cost of electricity than anywhere else. If it's important for anywhere else, it's more important for us than ever. Reasons for this: a lot of houses off gas grid. Gas is a very cheap form of heating. Electricity isn't large miles, poor public transport infrastructure, a lot of rural areas. So I think it's still important. We're just going to have to work harder to find the routes to make it work.